Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Generative AI in 2024, a panel discussion made possible by Amazon Web Services. My name is Paul Verna, Principal Analyst and Head of the Advertising and Media team at Insider Intelligence. Joining me today are Jenna Flateman-Posner, Chief Digital Officer at Solo Brands. Hey, Jenna.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We have Todd Hassenfeld from Colgate-Palmolive is trying to dial in right now. He's having some technical issues, so we're going to continue and then hopefully have him on later. We have Christopher Thomas Moore, aka CTM, a three initials kind of guy. We love that. Senior Vice President and Chief Digital Officer at Domino's. Welcome, CTM.
Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone.
We have Lizzie Widhelm, Senior Vice President, B2B Marketing and Ad Innovation at SiriusXM. Welcome.
Hi, happy Friday, everybody.
Thanks. And last but not least, we have John Williams, Global Head of Agency Business Development at AWS. Hey, John.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for all of you for being here. So before we start, folks in the audience, please let us know where you're tuning in from. And I'd also like everyone in the audience to weigh in on this question in the chat. Do you use generative AI in your personal life? If so, how? So you can just let us know by using the chat window to the right of the video feed. Spoiler alert, I'm going to ask the same questions of all the panelists at the end. But more importantly for the audience, ask us other questions because we're going to have a Q&A segment at the end. So with that, let's get started. Jenna, I'd like to start with you. We've seen some pretty big hype cycles in the last 2 years with things like crypto, NFTs, and the metaverse. What makes generative AI different?
Yeah, I would say from a hype perspective, I agree. We're feeling a very similar amount of hype as it relates to generative as we did around the metaverse and crypto and NFTs. And I think, as executives, when we look at those potential technologies, it quite literally forced us to consider and conceptualize how to operate outside of our realities. And that's difficult, right? That's really hard to do. And I think one of the biggest differences is that as we look to bleeding edge technology, we try to implement that tech in a way that we can validate it, that we can test it, that we can learn, that we can measure it, and then we can start predicting what is the payback really going to look like. And so the benefit of generative AI is that there's so many unbelievable applications to our day-to-day roles, whether it's translation, whether it's the localization or colloquialization of content, whether it's dynamic product copywriting or it's co-pilot solutions for expediting development efforts. There are so many possible ways that we can use this to create efficiencies and drive measurable results within our own businesses, that when you're looking at building and creating cross-stakeholder alignment, it becomes really easy. Because if I can actually measure that I can create copy in 10x, 10x savings from a time perspective, or I can have an attach rate that increases by 40% on customer service outreach because I can use a chatbot that's generative and doesn't lose the emotional connection with the consumer because it does feel so conversational, then I can really justify and tell the story around the investment of generative AI. And I think that's the biggest difference, right? The metaverse required a new way of thinking, kind of this out of the box, conceptualization of the technology, where this is much more applicable today. We've had really great success at Solo Brands when it comes to testing AI. There are some scenarios around customer service where we did see over a 40% attach rate to tickets created through chatbot outreach. We saw an unbelievable CSAT score, just south of a 5 out of 5. And we also saw a decrease in workload of over 30%. And so I think one of the biggest value adds here of all of this is that this AI is really allowing us to free up our resources to do human things, to think creatively, to do things the bot can't do today that we tend to get bogged down with. So I think we've just scratched the surface. I think there are so many more applications that we have yet to prove out and measure. And I'm really bullish that generative is absolutely here to stay.
Well, we're going to come back to a lot of the themes you touched on, which are really important. And I guess the short story, though, is that this is a lot more than hype. So, this is reality, and it's also a smoother transition from the world we inhabited before ChatGPT kind of exploded into what we're living through now and what's coming. So I'm going to move on to Lizzie. So Lizzie, tell us how SiriusXM is exploring using AI and AI generated voices to make audio advertising production more efficient and more creative.
Yeah, and similar to, Jenna, the goal, especially for how we think about advertising and specifically like what is the process we go through to make great creative for our advertisers, is just to try to get scale and speed out of the process. We talk to a lot of our copywriters and a lot of the creatives and makers within the building, and they really want to work on strategic creative. They want to have those deep conversations with clients. And so the cold start of going from audio brief to copy to even using this synthetic voice to give mock creative, like the ability to do that effortlessly and so quickly allows them to scale off to so many more customers. And so that's really how we're exploring it today. It's really about speed of our process for our internal makers, and then being able to spread that to more customers and ultimately work all the way down to a small business customer. That is not something we've been able to offer, and something we're really excited about, which is the ability for a very small business to come in and build audio creative pretty effortlessly and buy into the space. So it's everything from our makers internally to opening up opportunity for small and medium-sized businesses. And then really same thing Jenna said, like our employees just want to do more creative thinking, and the hands-on keyboard in business process and managing business process is not what they want to be doing. And AI can really solve for that.
Well, we'll come back to a lot of those points as well, Lizzie. A lot of great ideas there, and I think exploring the ways in which AI is being used in the creative process is super critical. So we will get back there during the conversation. John, in our conversation that we had before we kicked off, you mentioned that a solid data foundation is essential for generative AI to work effectively for your organization. Can you expand on that?
Sure. I think, well, for any organization, data is a company's key differentiator. Before any customer embarks on their generative AI journey, they really need to have a strong data foundation. So, just to give an example, the use of vector embedding, so that's words that are related in context, having vectors closer together, really helps machines understand the similarities and the differences between words. And so, as a company, as you embed vectors, you need to make sure that your company's data will work well when implementing generative AI. And then the other thing that needs to be considered is that data needs to be stored in the cloud, so it's easily accessible by the generative AI models. That customers need to be fine-tuned for all those specific tasks for an organization that the folks just talked about on this call.
Great. Well, thanks for those great insights, John. More to come on that as well. And CTM, can you tell us about Domino's partnership with Microsoft around AI? You touched on this when we spoke earlier, and I think it's really interesting. So tell us all about it.
Yeah, so we announced recently that we've launched an innovation partnership with Microsoft in building out an innovation lab where we can really identify how we can elevate our experiences for both our consumer side as well as our frontline team member side in our stores by leveraging some of these newer technologies. I feel like the conversation of generative AI still, I would still say that there is still a ton of hype and unknown about it, right? I think that there is a promise of a reality that could be really great for our businesses. But there's still a lot of unknowns. There aren't a ton of use cases that are kind of globally used yet. And we're hoping that through this partnership, we can start to create some of those and understand how we can bring to life more enriched and personalized experiences for both our customers and our team members through leveraging some of these technologies. So a lot of testing, a lot of discovery that will happen, over the subsequent months and years as we kind of go down this path to really understand how are we influencing the brand as a result of these technologies? Where are some of the watchouts? What are some of the processes that take a little longer to get to maturity? At Domino's, we've been, AI focused and machine learning for a number of years. But now the space has changed and there's a lot more at our fingertips that we can leverage and levers that we can pull through some of the new large language models that are available. So we're really excited to learn and discover what we can do.
Yeah, and it's a good point about the fact that, Domino's, like a lot of brands, has been using AI for a long time. I think that's something that maybe gets lost a little bit to anyone who's not a practitioner, because it seems that AI just came out of nowhere this year, but of course it didn't. So I'd like to dig into that a little bit more as we get into the conversation, particularly like, what has actually changed with this, with generative AI and ChatGPT kind of like bursting into the public consciousness. But let me throw this data point out there, and I'd like to hear from folks on what they think about it. So over half of marketers currently use generative AI, and another 22% plan to use it soon, according to a survey by Salesforce. So wondering how that data point rings to everyone, and just so that we're not like, awkwardly trying to figure out who goes because we're not in the same room. I guess I'll randomly, Lizzie, I'll throw it to you, and then you guys can bat it around if you want.
I'm surprised it's not 100%, to be honest. The like early work we're doing just within our company, just within the marketing team, work that might never ship out of the building, is speeding up so much of our process and allowing us to test and learn against concepts that might never get resourced. So I'm really surprised it's not 100%. Maybe there's some concern on the marketer side about how they allow their teams to create and make great content, and how would approval cycles work, and how do we stay on brand. But from my experience, we are working within a tight toolkit where we're controlling the voice of our brand and allowing our individual contributors, from the very early entry marketer all the way up through our creative directors, to play around with some of the early tools. And we're getting really happy internal contributors who are putting out great work, and we're able to iterate in market with more personalized messaging. So I only see upside. I will say though that there's so many vendors out there, and doing vendor assessment and really understand how our data is sitting and where it's sitting and what permissions and controls we have around it is definitely a place where we are spending a lot of time. And so it's a little bit of playing really fast, but also going slow to make sure we're doing it right. But I just don't understand why 100% of marketers aren't at least, evaluating and assessing.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, that survey was from June, and between June and November is an
Oh,
eternity
well,
in.
Paul, that's like 5 years ago.
So it's probably closer to 100%. But there is a fear factor, or a kind of like, how do we make this work? And maybe a little bit of decision paralysis. So maybe I could see where it's not 100%, but I agree with you that it should definitely be getting toward that point. Anyone else have any thoughts on CTM?
Yeah, I'll just chime in. And I think that there are still a lot of unknowns of this space, right? Specifically when you get into the legalities of the actual ownership of content. And there also, I expect that there will be more regulations coming down around use cases for generative AI. So I think that that also provides a level of hesitation for brands, right? Because there is still some ambiguity of this space. I'm interested to see, as it continues to mature, adoption continues to grow, where that puts us. As we've seen, sometimes that those legislations and rulings could be favorable for the brand. Sometimes they will not be. So, I think we have a lot to still learn about this space, over the upcoming years. And so I think that that probably is a factor of where there might be some hesitation as well.
Yeah, makes sense. Jenna, did you have a thought to add here?
Yeah, I sit on a number of client advisory boards for our technologies that we have in market. And what I realized is that many of them have been utilizing AI within their own technologies for years. And I've really been encouraging them to help communicate to executive leadership on the utilization of AI and giving us the ability to actually go back to leadership and go back to our teams internally and say, hey, you know what, we've been using AI for years. You just didn't know it. And so I think that's been a very interesting tool to validate the need, the investment, the value. And I think the big difference that we're seeing now is that through ChatGPT, as an example, AI has been unlocked for the common individual. And so we now have access to it and we can use it in a way that we never have before. And that leads to all of this new testing and learning. But the truth is that, I agree wholeheartedly with Lizzie that it should be 100%. I can't imagine a retailer or a business out there right now that isn't utilizing AI, whether it's a first or third party implementation today.
Yeah, yeah. Jenna, let me stay with you for the next question,
Sure.
which I know we touched on some of these aspects of generative AI, but what areas does generative AI support for your business? So is it productivity, content creation, campaign targeting, all of the above, or
All the
others?
things. Yes, all
Everything.
the things. We're definitely leaning into it pretty heavily. I mentioned it before. I can think just offhand, 5 third-party implementations that we've done that utilize AI today. The one that we've really leaned into and really measured effectively has really been around customer service, and I really can't explain how valuable it's been. I think everybody has leaned into the concept of a chatbot, right? Whether it's live chat or it's a chatbot, but historically they've really leaned into a requirement around this kind of decision tree concept. So you've got to spend all of this time building out these flows. If this, then that. If yes, do this. If no, do that, right? And so it creates a lot of extra work to create this automated environment for deflection, essentially, right? For the bot to be able to manage some of these common questions, like where's my order, as an example. And so the value of generative is that you don't have to do that at all anymore, right? It just operates, and it doesn't just operate, but it operates in a very conversational way, where you get to maintain that connection with the consumer. And the benefit for us is that there are some consumers that really don't need a heavy touch, and there are some consumers that really, really do. And when you're bogged down having a human answer the "Where's my order?" question, for 60% of your outreach, it ties up your customer service representatives. And so having a tool that can alleviate the burden of kind of the monotonous incidents that have that kind of need to really lean into those customers that need a conversation, or represent an opportunity for an upsell or a cross sell. That is a measurable impact to the business that we've leaned into and we champion.
Uh, John, I'd like to get your take on this question of what areas generative AI supports in your business.
I mean, I'll echo some of the feedback you already had. Like AI has been prevalent in Amazon's business for decades. But where we're hearing a lot of customer interest now is for helping create content and images for their advertising and marketing campaigns. And so at AWS, we've worked really closely with our colleagues in Amazon Ads and helped them launch image generation in a beta. So that's the ability to help remove creative barriers, enable brands to produce lifestyle imagery that actually improves their ads performance. And so as an advertiser, if you have a standalone image of a product against a white background like a toaster, when that toaster is placed in a lifestyle context, so a kitchen counter next to a croissant, in a sponsored brands ads, the click-through rates on that advertising performance can go up to over 40% higher compared to a normal image. And so now in Amazon Ads, we've developed a product, and you can click generate, and with the tool leverage generative AI to deliver a set of lifestyle and brand themed images based on the product details in seconds, and then sort of do multivariate testing of those to optimize your performance. And so we're developing an array of tools like that are useful for both our business and for the customers of Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the parts of, I think, e-commerce that hasn't been fully solved is like getting to those, the engagement with the customer where you're really talking to them in ways they understand and using video and imagery in a richer way. So I think if you can help your advertisers, sort of get to that point, get from point A to point B more quickly, I think we're probably going to see the benefits of that, filter out into the whole ecosystem. What are the biggest benefits you've all realized from generative AI in your marketing efforts? And maybe I'll, CTM, we'll start with you on this one.
There've been a ton of applications for us, both on the consumer side, but also in kind of just base operations of our business. So, from customer service standpoint, how can we service our guests that have issues and more effectively and quickly through leveraging this technology? But from a consumer standpoint, there's also been a ton that we've done from campaign build outs, as well as we kind of targeted and segmented to be more relevant to specific segments and cohorts of audiences, how we're leveraging the technology to help make those breakthroughs for us. But also, as we look at store operations, and specifically as we think of Domino's, a business that's delivering millions of pizzas a day, there's a lot of logistics involved with that, and how can we leverage technology like this to have more efficient drive routes, to identify how we can be more effective with executing on the delivery of our orders to our customers in the safest and most reliable way possible. And so we're seeing a lot of different point applications. What I'm really excited about is looking at how we string all of those together and look at kind of full journey build out, leveraging some of these models to think of not just a one step progression in time, but how we can fully automate experiences and life cycles for customers by leveraging this technology across a number of touch points in the business.
And Jenna, I think I know the answer to this, but do you have any thoughts on benefits you've realized from generative AI? And you have already touched on them, but I'd like to hear more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One is obviously the customer service route, and I can speak to a past life as well from a content creation standpoint. Um, we're trying to diversify our businesses every day, and sometimes that means extending product sets. Sometimes that means leaning into new channels like marketplaces or wholesale, and other times that means lighting up technologies around drop shipping. In my previous role as CDO of Snipes, which is a global sneaker and streetwear retailer, we actually enabled roughly 2 weeks worth of product copy in about 2 hours. So just understanding that you can really create measurable efficiencies, and in the world of footwear and apparel and accessories, I mean your time to market. I mean you're racing against every other wholesaler in the market, and so pace becomes a direct tie back to revenue. And so utilizing AI to create some efficiencies around that, I think, is really important. It was a very interesting process going to your copywriter saying, "Hey, I want you to use this AI to create this copy and see what it does. See how you like it." You approach these copywriters, and it's their craft, right? They're artists, and I think what was very interesting about the answer I got when I started tasking them with this was they started to understand that product copy was it was just a necessity, right? It wasn't really an indication of creativity necessarily. It's built for SEO purposes. It's designed to drive searchability and rank. And so what it really did in the business was it freed up our copywriters to write about things that really mattered, community events, ways that we were impacting very local communities, the work that we were doing from a philanthropic angle. And it allowed us to do much more storytelling that differentiated ourselves in the market in a way that would have been lost if they didn't have the time because they were bogged down with product copy. So, I think there's a lot of fear sometimes. Am I going to get put out of a job? Is this going to replace me? I don't, I still to this day 100% disagree with that sentiment. I think people need to be secure. I think, Scott Galloway said it best. AI is not going to put you out of work, right? Not knowing how to utilize AI is going to put you out of work. So I agree with that statement wholeheartedly.
And as soon as we're done with this panel, Jenna, I'm going to ask you to tell me how to turn 2 weeks into 2 hours for me for the rest of my life, because I could really use it.
Yeah,
So
it's pretty cool.
we talked about, a couple of you cited customer service, which is really important and something that I don't think about as much because I'm in the kind of like advertising world. Obviously, we talked about marketing. Are there impacts outside of what we've already discussed? And I don't know, Lizzie, any thoughts on that? And if there aren't any, that's fine. I'm just asking the questions.
Yeah, no, there are. One of the teams that is, near and dear to my heart because it's where I started my career is our sales team. We did a survey earlier this year, maybe back around June, to try to understand what made their life suck. Like, put simply, like, I want to make your job suck less. What part of what you do every day do you think a computer could do better? It's a really simple question. It's a really easy way to try to understand what they want to offboard. And you can not imagine how much time they were spending on finding answers to frequently asked questions from marketers, trying to find, the best creative that a CPG advertiser had done, or creative that drove really good results against a specific, KPI, and getting all of our data in the right place in order for them to effortlessly get answers to all of those questions and not have to phone a friend is a real win for them and gives them the opportunity to spend less time on those tasks and more time with their clients and customers in a strategy function, doing the work that makes everyone get excited and get up every day to be in this advertising business. So we're seeing big wins. We've rolled out a tool for our salespeople that allows them to use a generative AI, open prompt and get quick answers. And then we're collecting all of the data we can't respond to. So we just continue to build this data set. On the back of AWS, I might add. And so that's just a huge win for them to allow them to get on the street. And we don't talk about salespeople all the time, but in this world, there's so much complexity to digital that I think it's an area that we'll see an opportunity to drive more revenue because they have more time.
Yeah, and John, I want to bring it back to you for a second. And you talked earlier about the tool sets that you're making available to your customers. Can you tell us a little bit more about how they've actually been able to benefit from working with you on generative AI projects or powered by generative AI?
Sure. So at AWS, we democratize access to generative AI through an array of foundation models that are available through AWS Bedrock, which includes AI 21, Claude from Anthropic, and Stable Diffusion for high quality images and logos. And some of the customers' use of that, for example, Omnicom is an extremely large agency holding group, is one of our customers, and they're going to advance their existing AI platform, which is called Omni, by creating new generative AI foundational models that help automate activities, including developing creative briefs, developing media plans, developing ad creative, audience segmentation, and performance measurement. And so they're sort of holistically transforming the way that they do business, leveraging generative AI through AWS. And then one of the other sort of agencies in that group is an agency called Credera. And we've seen them already make dramatic improvements in operations time for the time required to produce content for distribution by brands. And so I would sort of echo the thoughts that generative AI can dramatically increase both the production of materials, but also operational processes very significantly.
I think we have firmly established that this is not a hype cycle. This is real. It's evolving very rapidly, has evolved very rapidly already. Where is it going in the next 2-3 years? Machine learning, AI, generative AI.
I personally think the two use cases that I'm most excited about that I think are kind of in their infancy. It was funny you brought up Salesforce. They have a really interesting Copilot tool that's coming out, which is really enabling more like conversational coding, being able to actually like prompt a model that will actually pump out code and that will feed into their composable commerce environment to actually enable the creation of new components to be really, really fast and expedited. I think that's really exciting to me. The second is around, from a retail tech perspective, conversational search. So when I walk into a store today and I walk in and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a pair of red shoes," the store associate doesn't say, "I'll be right back," and come back with every red shoe in every size and say, "Okay, which one do you want?" Right? They ask me questions. They say, "Are you going to play basketball? Are you going out? Are you going to go for a run? Like what do you need it for? Oh, and what's your size?" And then they go back into the stock room and they bring back like maybe one or two examples of a shoe I might like. So right now, that's not how it works online. Right now, we give you everything, and we put the onus on the consumer to filter down and engage with this wide array of products in order to find what it is they're looking for. So this idea of conversational search, I think, is so compelling because it allows you to create a real connection and context with the consumer very early in their buying cycle to really filter down those results and drive to conversion as effectively as possible. So those are the two I'm most excited about in the near term.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, those of us who are ancient enough to remember how Google and search evolved, early on, you really couldn't ask a conversational question. Now you can sort of like type a conversational question, but you're still getting, Jenna, to your point, you're still getting kind of like a fire hose of results. So I think what you're saying is like a way to get it to a point where it's just more like real interaction and you asking a simple question, getting a simple answer that's not full of like extraneous stuff. And by the way, you should probably say that you worked for a sneaker brand before you go into that store because it'll just put everyone on notice. Um, CTM, any thoughts on like crystal ball? 2-3 years, what are we going to see?
I'm not sure, and that's what I think is so exciting. I think that's why I love the space of digital is that it's ever changing and evolving. And I think that as we look forward, I think as we start to see more proof points that are repeatable that brands can pick up and port over into their business, I think we'll start to see continued growth from an adoption standpoint. I again, probably am more the pessimistic person on this panel on AI, but I still think that there's a lot that still needs to be defined in the space, and I still think that, from the legality standpoint, but also from an inclusion and diversity standpoint, ensuring that these models understand those sensitivities, right? And that starts with who's coding those, and do we have diverse audiences that are helping build these large language models and processors, right? And so I think that there's a lot that we will evolve as an industry as we continue to move forward, but I still think that we're at the very tip of the iceberg, and there is a ton more to discover and learn.
Yeah, and you brought up some great points, and our live Q&A, which we'll get to in a minute, addresses some of these concerns, some of these pain points. So maybe we'll save that part of the conversation to talking about that. Lizzie, I want to give you a chance, and John, to kind of like just give a quick sense of where do you see things going in the next couple of years?
I'm really excited about the low code or no code automation. I mean, in my role, I deal so much with our product and engineering team, and all of the deferred maintenance tasks or automation that gets stacked up and hidden in the roadmap where you just can't push the big innovation through fast enough. If we can leverage AI to pull so much of that off the table and scale low technical work to many, I think the speed with which we can innovate around really exciting ways to think about, obviously in our space, audio and music and spoken word, more importantly, and build the future of what we want our listeners to experience. That's kind of what's most exciting for me, because I'd love nothing more than to not always be fighting about priorities, which I'm sure everyone on this panel can relate to.
John, last word on that, the crystal ball.
Yeah, I think generative AI can and will resolve the issues related to the amount of data, lagging insights, and complex workflows. So a lot of those automation capabilities are going to happen. But I think what's also really interesting is sort of the notion of improving the experiences customers are going to receive and expect as the recipient of both marketing messages and advertising campaigns. And that's really exciting. It's going to transform the way that people engage with advertising. And so I think that's really exciting.
Well, I'm sorry to be the guy who over promises and under delivers, but as expected, there were so many great viewpoints and there's so much to talk about in this conversation that I'm going to have to skip the part where I ask you about your personal uses of AI. And I want to just go to one live question, the only one we have time for. And excuse me while I turn away and look at another screen, but there's a question from the audience about privacy. What is being done to guarantee customer privacy? If it's too personalized, some customers will feel violated. So take it away. Maybe John, we'll start with you.
I mean, I can tell. So from an AWS perspective, we build our foundational models with responsible AI in mind every step of the process. And so that process is accuracy. So how closely does a summary match the underlying document? Whether biography is factually correct, fairness, whether outputs are treating demographic groups similarly, intellectual property and copyright considerations, appropriate usage, so we're going to filter out user requests for legal advice, medical diagnosis, or illegal activities, and then obviously toxicity. We're going to, for example, hate speech, profanity, and insults will also be filtered out. And then 6, from a privacy perspective, because everything's happening in AWS, you're able to protect your personal information and customer prompts. And so we're building all of our solutions to address those issues directly into our processes for acquiring training data and into the foundation models themselves. So we think this is super important in terms of the way that we think about the responsible development of AI and generative AI.
CTM, since you brought up some of your concerns around inclusivity, potential bias, I want to give you the last word before we wrap up. Just tell us what some of the concerns that rise to the top for you and what you think can be done to address them.
Yeah, I think that John hit it on, spot on as far as it's a myriad of different aspects that, make for a very inclusive experience when it comes to AI. From inclusivity of tone, language to hate speech and other things that are negative experiences that then potentially then are reflective on the brand as well. So I think that a lot of organizations like AWS are working towards shoring those elements up, but I think that there are still cases where we see that we're not there yet. So, but I think that as long as there is true intention to address this, globally from multiple providers, I am really excited that we will end up in a good place. But it has to be a focal point for all of us, both on the brand side, to make sure that we're pushing our providers to make sure that they're addressing those things, but also from a provider standpoint to ensure that they have the best solution that's addressing both the needs of the brands as well as the end users that are going to be recipients of those experiences. So, I feel like, again, John hit a lot of those great points, and my hope is that a lot of other organizations that are suppliers in the space have the same intention and focus that was just made.
Well, CTM, Jenna, Lizzie, John, thank you all so much for this great content and answering the audience question. We really appreciate it. I feel like we need a sequel because we really just only scratched the surface, and you're all so thoughtful and great and fun to work with. So hope we get to do it again. Next up, we have Ethan Chernovsky, Senior Vice President of Marketing at Placer.ai. He will have a deep dive discussion with Insider Intelligence Vice President Marissa Kozlov on location analytics. So join Ethan and Marissa by clicking on the tab below the video that says Next Session. And while you wait for this next session to begin, don't forget to check out our new networking feature on the left side of the navigation panel. Take your photo and upload it to our gallery where you can see other attendees, analysts, and presenters. And thank you all so very much. Enjoy the rest of your workday and your weekend.